So we just finished with the lower fork tube, and now on to what?
Now we're going to disassemble and check out the inner cartridge. So this is the 25 millimeter. They went to this, I think, in 2018 on the YZ450F, and then followed the year after on the 250F. And then I think this also comes on the new KX250, and it might come on something else, but this is a very common cartridge. If you have a YZ250 or an older 24 millimeter cartridge, the assembly, disassembly is going to be essentially identical, other than the outer dimension, which is 29 millimeters.
So this is another special tool that you can put in the vise. It's got multiple sizes on here, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
that's cool.
Different sizes, just to ensure that you're not clamping or ovalizing, damaging the cartridge. So I can clamp this in here and not worry about compressing the cylinder or damaging anything internally. So even with that, this is just to hold it. So with it clamped in place, I'm still using my fork cap wrench to prevent the cartridge from rotating.
If somebody didn't have the vise, how would they do this? How would you do it without the vise?
I don't know. I'm not going to say, because it would be the wrong way.
Got it.
I've seen it. I've seen
but
leather.
But you don't want to be the perpetuator.
I've seen wood blocks and leather gloves and who knows what else. But if you want to do it the right way, it's.
So you would say with the vise and the soft jaws is maybe the most important tool if you want to do your own suspension?
Yes. That being said, you don't want to clamp this directly into your soft jaws, because you can, ovalize that cartridge or damage it. So this is just the setup I use. Somebody else might have a better or more streamlined setup, but yeah, we just there you go. I'm kind of shot out of there. So there you go. You can see it's a little bit dirty, just some old oil. So we'll clean that out. Always put the tool back so you know where to find it next time.
Is that your OCD talking?
Yeah, it's just my OCD. It's the only method I found that works. Otherwise, I end up searching for tools. So.
This oil seemed to be a little cleaner inside the inner cartridge.
Yeah, the inner cartridge tends to stay a little cleaner than the outer cartridge. You don't have the spring riding up and down inside of here. But I have seen these come out black if you wear through the coating. This is a light Kashima coating on these damping rods. So if you lose that lubrication property of your oil, this wears through really quick. Right at the top of the stroke, where this is just constantly hammering up and down, a lot of times you'll wear through that. So make sure you've got good oil, not the cheap oil. There's a lot of good products out there. So yeah, we'll take these and get them all cleaned off.
Washing dishes again.
Washing dishes.
You're one of the better paid dishwashers, though.
That's true.
I mean,
and I enjoy the dishes that I wash. If it was macaroni and cheese and oatmeal, or I wouldn't do this every day. But it is fun to disassemble something, completely clean it out, and put it back together 100% the right way, as far as you know how. So try not to spray yourself too much.
How did you get interested in doing suspension work and opening your own shop?
I opened the shop to buy and sell motorcycles. I had done a few sets of my own fork seals before starting the shop, but I was completely out of my element with it still. We got set up with Race Tech as a dealer. I went to their training and I saw how enjoyable that would be. It's just, it fit really well with the type of work I do. This is, the more I can specialize in something, the more enjoyable I guess it becomes, and there's so much to do and to learn within suspension. It's always, I feel like I'm always going to be a student, never quite a master, just because I'm always learning more, and there's always more people to learn from. So
what would you say is the most challenging part of your job as a suspension tech?
Talking to the customers. You got to talk to the customers to know what their needs are. I'm a bit introverted, so I'm not a real big people person naturally, but I do find it enjoyable to talk to people about their suspension and helping them to be happier on the bike, because at the end of the day, it's the suspension and the handling of the bike that's going to make a difference. It's not the $1,000 exhaust pipe or the, you know, some of the other stuff. But the most challenging part for me, honestly, is trying to run the business while trying to enjoy suspension. But I've got a good crew of employees downstairs, and they kind of leave me to my own devices, for better or for worse. So for me, there's not much too unenjoyable or hard about suspension itself. It's just about everything else around it that I have to do.
So this is almost like the Zen part of your job is actually just doing the work.
Just plugging in and doing suspension. Anytime I can turn the phone off and get into just doing suspension, that's kind of my happy place.
So we talked about it would be nice to have all the bikes in the shop so that you know that the suspension is properly installed. But you do a lot of mail order stuff too. So how does that work with the customer? How do they get the product to you? I mean, their suspension to you.
So we're working on making some boxes, but in the meantime, Harbor Freight, they sell gun cases like those Apache gun cases. I think they're 169 bucks. We have a lot of customers send them in hard gun cases or other suspension boxes.
Okay.
So we do have some information on our website to help, you know, with shipping address and calling and making sure that we have all of your info. So yeah, we're trying to refine that process a little bit more. So
one of the challenges that I've seen is just sometimes the customer, it's nice to get a good follow-up if a customer does a revalve. Like, service is one thing. If they do a revalve on their suspension, the mail order thing can make it a little bit of a barrier for the customer to kind of get that follow-up tune if they need that. How do you guys handle that here at the shop? Because I've heard so many good things about the follow-up and the customer service side of things after the fact. How have you guys tried to manage that side of the business?
So once we send the suspension back, we'll commonly hear from the customer just with setup questions, or they'll go out and they'll ride it the first time, and then they'll have some questions about clickers. So the biggest thing, I don't have a set process for that, but you can always call in and get on the phone with myself, or someone downstairs that can answer those questions for you. So we do provide a very personalized experience in that regard. We're never too busy to, or we try to not be too busy to take customer questions and calls. Because like we were talking about earlier, everybody has different needs and concerns, and sometimes it requires talking to the customer. I've gotten emails, like pages of information from customers before, where they'll email in a list of their criteria and what they're looking for. And sometimes that's more confusing than helpful. So
on to measuring oil.
Measuring oil. Then in these cartridges, we drop about 210 cc's. And then I overfill by 5 cc because you never get that last 5 cc out unless you let it sit there and drip all day,
yeah,
which I don't have time for.
I don't know if they can see this, but so that's a special measuring cup. That's awesome. How do people know how much oil to put in?
Sometimes their owner's manual will have the quantity. So yeah, you just want to make sure it's extended. And then pour until it drips, and that's, there we go.
That's why you went with the extra 5 cc's, so that you don't have to wait for that.
Yep, and then we'll just slowly stroke the cartridge until you can hear all the bubbles.
Just getting the air out of there.
Yeah, just getting the air all above the mid valve. So slow on compression and fast on rebound, and that helps to force any of that air.
Oh, interesting.
To the top of the mid valve. So
there is a method to what you're doing.
And don't go up. If you go up all the way and then you come down, you're going to spray the ceiling, which don't look on my ceiling. All right. So once that's,
so slow compression, fast rebound, and don't do the entire stroke.
Yeah.
To get that.
Yep. And again, we'll just clamp it nice and gently, and then oil up the O-rings so that everything kind of slides right in there without tearing an O-ring or causing damage. Get some oil on the threads too. So you just want to gently, you shouldn't have to force that in. If it gets to a stopping point, you might be damaging something. So I'm gonna grab my ratchet.
That's tricky there because you've got to start that under pressure.
Yeah. If you have the right oil amount in the cartridge, you shouldn't have to fight it too bad.
But that could be a potential damage point where somebody's stripping that out.
Yeah, if they're going in on a bind. So
because you're dealing with soft materials there.
Yeah. Yep.
And that would be an expensive.
When you're dealing with these cartridges, everything can end up being expensive. So just take care of it and don't force anything. Make sure everything is nice and clean. Most other cartridges, to bleed it, you just compress that damping rod all the way into the cartridge. On these KYBs, you want to leave like a fingernail. So I'll kind of demonstrate.
And then we're bleeding out of that hole.
Yeah, we're pushing all the excess oil and air up past that free piston.
And you're using a fingernail here just because you know that's...
If you push that all the way in, it won't rebound completely.
Oh. And that's specific to these KYB cartridges?
Yeah. WP, Showa, you can compress that, or you're supposed to compress it all the way, as far as I know, and they still rebound all the way. So anyways, we'll just go through the stroke a few times, and nice and quiet, no air.
And we did hear air that first time.
Yeah, that was the air pushing up past the free piston. So this is a lint-free towel. I just do this for final assembly to make sure everything's nice and dry. So what we're going to do now is assemble the cartridge into the fork tube, and we're going to just verify your spring preload. Drop the fork spring in, reinstall the perch on the cartridge, and then just so I'll measure the distance from the top cap to the top of the fork tube before, about 321, 320. Then we'll put it back in the vise. I extend the tube just so that it acts as a guide, so that it's all connected. So that way we just push it through, reinsert our damping rod holding tool, put some oil on the end of that rebound rod so it just slides in nice and smooth.
A service like this, even with your processes, with everything that you're doing, takes approximately 30 minutes for you to
it takes
out.
about an hour.
Oh, for the full set.
For the full set of forks.
And that's even with you doing it all the time, so if
yeah,
a weekend warrior is going to have to, you know,
and that's if everything goes well. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but I don't do anything fast. I kind of do everything slow and methodically, because if you try to do anything too fast, you can skip steps or miss out on the quality. So now that the cartridge is assembled, we'll remeasure, you know, the same measurement, which about 316, and that's 4 millimeters of preload, so that's exactly what we're shooting for on this setup. So, oops, 320 minus 316, and there's your 4 millimeters.
Okay.
Then we'll set the clickers. So you want to go in until it just lightly bottoms. So that's the last click, and then you feel it getting hard. You don't force it, because these are all aluminum components, and it does damage when you force it. So we're going to come out 14 clicks. And then same principle on the top.
Brushing up here.
Yeah.
Is that first click 1 or is the first click 0?
So you go, yeah, you go all the way in. So
all the way in and then back it out to that first actual click.
So that's a nice soft stopping point. So I'll back it out. That's your click 1. So, or click 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4, out to 10. then we'll fill that outer chamber.
How much are we going here?
On this, we're going to 330.
And if people did less or more oil, how would they feel that? Like if you wanted to have a little bit softer feel, do you adjust oil, or do you do that only through valving?
So the oil height doesn't have as much effect as I think most people think. This is where you get your bottoming resistance. So raising or lowering your oil height, that's going to become most apparent in the last, third of the stroke, towards bottoming out. That's where the air gap is shrinking inside of the fork, and it's starting to build its own air spring. So this controls the air spring internally of the fork. So this is more of a single track off-road light setup, so we don't need to run up to the 400cc mark where you need that maximum bottoming resistance like you do on a track or hitting G outs.
Okay.
But the nice thing about the KYB fork is it's very I guess linear. It has, you rarely, unless it's set up completely soft, you're rarely going to feel it bottom out. The KYB forks I've ridden, you'll notice that the stroke indicator, this red ring, when you're done riding, it'll be pushed clear to the bottom, but a lot of times you don't feel it. It's like, oh, I didn't know I was bottoming out. So that's a good scenario when you're using all of the stroke but not feeling that bottom.
Nice.
So if you've ridden like 4CS forks or some other open chamber forks, those many times you feel it when it bottoms. It's a mechanical bottoming out because it doesn't have the same progression. So till you get a drip, and then you're done. Tried using a vise with my right hand the other day, and it was like riding with my left hand or throwing a football. It's like I'm right-handed, but I don't know how to use a vise with my right hand anymore. So, okay, final check. We're just make sure everything feels and sounds nice and clean. So, feels good.
Sweet. Now on to cleaning and stickers, huh?
Yeah, the most important part. And then for that, I use the contact cleaner. I know it's electrical contact cleaner, but it works really well for decontaminating these outer tubes. And we'll apply some light heat. You can see it just burns or evaporates any of the moisture still in the tube. And this is, I know it's a torch, but that tube never gets too hot to touch.
You're just evaporating these
I'm
solvents
just evaporating
and things off.
the moisture out of the tube so that we get a good stick with our sticker.
Because you wouldn't want to cook that oil.
Yeah, well, yeah, you don't want to like overheat the anodizing on the tube either. So, and we'll position the bleed screw forward. So so that we can apply that sticker. And because this is the non-brake side, I install it upside down.
Very important right here.
Yeah, it's the most important step.
It's a good looking sticker.
Yeah, we have my throttle therapy, Mikey Powell. He makes all of our suspension stickers. There you go.
Fantastic. Looks amazing. So that's it.
That's it.
That's how it works.
That is how the cookie crumbles. So,
What is a typical suspension service cost, like with ballpark ranges? If you're going to send it into a shop to MotoXperts, what does that typically look like if somebody wanted to have you do it instead of do it at home?
we're typically about, if we're doing, you know, the full service like you see here, we're usually about $300 on the fork, and then roughly the same on the shock. So to do full service, you're about $600. And then if you're needing a respring or a revalve, it just kind of gets stacked on top of that. So in this case, if we were to have installed gold valves, you would just add the cost of the gold valves, $350. So fully serviced and set up, you'd be $650.
Cool. Very good. Okay, any final thoughts on this? Anything that we missed? Or closing remarks?
If you're doing it, just make sure you're enjoying it. Otherwise, you're doing it wrong. If you're doing it to save money, I understand that too. But make sure you do it the right way, or the best way that you know how. That's really all I do. That's why I have all the tools and the equipment that I do, is I am doing it the best way that I know how. So that's the only advice and encouragement I can give you. If you're doing it from home, do it the right way. Invest in the tools that are going to help you to do a good job, and feel free to call us if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin.
We're always here to help.
Thank you, and we'll throw it's themotoexperts.com, right?
We're actually motoexperts.com now.
Good thing
that was expensive.
Good thing I asked. Okay. Thanks for letting us come into your shop and invade your space and into the dojo. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks.
Yep.